Welcome back. This is Coach Kel, and this is What You Reading, Coach. Thank you for tuning in, and I want to start off with apology. I apologize for not posting anything last week, but I was preparing to go back to school. You can get more information on that on this Wednesday on the Hi, I'm Kel episode. But not going to waste a lot of time. I want to thank all of you all who have been supporting the Coach Kale movement, looking at the videos, liking the videos, commenting. It is greatly appreciated. Um, with this particular episode, we will be going back to um, the Seven Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra, and we'll be doing an overview of chapter 3. But before we get into that, please continue to follow us on all of our social medias. You can find me at Coach Kale Inspires on Instagram. And then also on Instagram, you can find the Jewels and Tools podcast. We just released the new episode last week. So please make sure that you go to all of your podcasts, all your podcast outlets. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Anchor. So you'll be able to find all the content um, on those sites as well. And then please make sure that you are following us on YouTube, Coach Kel, on the YouTube. Make sure that you're liking, that you subscribe, leave your comments, and then most of all, make sure you turn on your notifications because we'll be putting more and more content out on that medium. So I'll actually be putting these out on that medium as well, and then also the Hi I'm Kales, and then also, of course, the Jewels and Tools podcast. So that'll be the centralized hub for all of the content that we are releasing. Um, so thank you for supporting. But we're just gonna get right into it. So the third law of spiritual success is the law of karma, or the law of cause and effect. And it starts off with this. Every action generates a force of energy that returns to us in like kind. What we sow is what we reap. Um, Me being a Christian, this is a term that I've heard since I was a child. My grandmother was big with constantly telling me, "You reap what you sow," and telling other people, "You reap what you sow." Um, and so this is one thing that I know to be true. Um, and it really starts with the thoughts, because when you're going through the process of leveling up, you have to be very mindful of the thoughts that you allow to plant seeds in the garden of your mind. If they're positive thoughts, if they're forward moving thoughts, the garden of your mind will be plush with ripe fruit. Um, Now, on the other end of that, if your thoughts are fear based, your garden will be overran with weeds, suffocating all of the life and dreams that you have, which are your fruit. So, let's get right into it. So, one thing that I have learned is that when you are going through life, and you're just drifting and just living day to day, it is very easy for you to plant seeds that will not give you good fruit. That's why, we have to be very intentional in on what we think about, what we do, how we move, where we go, what we say, how we say it. And this chapter is really just about that. Um, One of the biggest things, it constantly is talking about what you sow is what you reap. Um, so it kind of implies that karma um, is the action of conscious choice making. Um, and when I say conscious choice making, One of the terms that you'll constantly hear me say is making a conscious decision. Making a decision is kind of just going by the seat of your pants. But when you're making conscious decision, um, or making conscious choices, what you're doing, you're taking in account those powers of three that I talked about before. You're taking account your mental man. You're taking account your physical man. You're taking account your spiritual man, um, and you're actually thinking before you go to action. Um, and that was that, and I think that's one thing that we all as people just need more practice in doing. We need to learn that everything is worth the process. Even the smallest of decisions is worth the process. There are times when you can go and make a split second decision just to keep from going into the realm of the law of diminishing intent, which basically states that if you have an idea, the longer that you wait to take action on it, the less likely you will actually fulfill whatever that thought or idea was. Um, so when it comes to sowing and reaping and making conscious decisions, you want action, but you want your actions to be subject to a conscious decision process. You want to do things that are intertwined and tied to your kingdom purpose, your purpose, the things that you know that you're supposed to be doing to level up, to ascend upward. Um, and by having that thought process, you have to also realize that it's it's not just for big decisions, it's for every decision. Um, I'll give you an example. So there are many times when in my life where I would get up and I would just say, you know what, today I'm doing what Kellen wants to do. I'm not going to work. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna do what Kel wants to do. Um, and now that I have ascended to another level, and I look back at that time in my life, and even sometimes now, I have to be kind of careful about sinking into that place because you never know what what you are doing is meant to positively impact another person. So, Wale has the song that I always listen to when I get in grind mode, "No Days Off," and that's really how you have to take it. Um, when you're out here and you're in your sowing season, you can't take days off in your sowing season. You got to plant as many seeds as you can in order to positively impact your life. So that means that's down to positive affirmations. That's down to planting the seeds for um, positive relationships, communication, um, finances. These are all seeds that we need to start taking in account, conscious account, and then making conscious decisions on where we're planting those seeds, how we're planting those seeds. And the process of planting those seeds should always be tied to it should always be tied to what we romanticize that we're gonna get in return. Sometimes you might sow a seed thinking that it's gonna be an apple, and when the fruit actually bears, it might be an orange. You know, but the thing is that you have to be reminded that and be consistent in sowing of good fruit. So you need to take an account for the seeds that you're allowing to grow in your mind. Um, Now, one of the big things that really caught me, it was on page 47. He for the first time he's used analogies in the book before, but this was the first time that he actually used like a technical analogy. And this is what he said. He says, the operational software of your soul is karma, memory, and desire. Your soul is a bundle of consciousness that has the seed of karma, memory, and desire. By becoming conscious of these seeds of manifestation, you become a conscious generator of reality. So he's saying that now your soul is the operational, your soul man is the operational software of your life. And it's built off of three things: karma, memory, and desire. Um, Karma being, the soul, you sow what you reap. The memory being that memories have one or two effects. They can either motivate you or they can stifle you. They can suffocate you. And it's a choice that you make from those memories. Some people, they look at their memories and their memories are shackles. Other people, they use their memories as air under their wings that allows them to fly and soar and see and have a greater vantage point. And now the last part of this operational software is the soul. I mean, excuse me, is desire, because desire desire is the thing that propels us. Um, if you have a desire for something, you usually will operate in a way to actually meet that desire. Um, One of the biggest desires that all people have is sexual expression. And a lot of times the sexual expression can get caught in translation. People, that's all they do for a large amount of their life, is try to figure out ways to express themselves sexually. Um, One of the biggest things that I have had to learn, especially with that piece, is something called sexual transmutation. When you use that energy for the expression of sexual desire, you use that energy because that's one of the biggest. Is, would I say biggest? No, that's one of the greatest sources of power that humans tap into is sexual expression. So there's this thing called sexual transmutation, to where you learn to transform that, take that energy and put it into something else creative. Um, because that is one of that's when you are looking to express yourself sexually, you go into a place of great creation. People become very, very creative when they want to express themselves sexually. That's why a lot of the media that we consume is sexually driven, because the power that's attached to it is great. And it's a great creative force. So we have to learn how to use these three things. We have to learn how to use karma. We have to have an understanding of karma, that whatever we're doing is actually sowing a seed, and we have to become mindful of that. Then we have to understand um, our thought process when it comes to memory. Are we going to allow those things to be an obstacle or a chain around our ankles and our necks? Or are we going to use it as gasoline just to propel us forward? And then with the desire, we have to understand that whatever it is that we want out of life, that should be our chief desire. That should be the thing that we focus on, and not get caught up in all the other mundane and all the other things that just draw energy from you at will. So, um, one thing that I liked about this particular chapter, um, it talked a lot about environment when it comes to sowing and reaping. And it says that most of us, as a result of conditioning, have repetitious and predictable responses to the stimuli in our environment. So that statement really drove home for me because growing up where I grew up, I react in a way that I was programmed to react when it comes to certain things. And as I became mindful of this, some of it bothered me. Some of my reaction actually bothered me. There are a lot of things that, due to my environment that I grew up in, um, there were a lot of great things that I learned from out of that environment. I learned how to hustle. I learned how to. I learned how to be a chameleon. I learned how to be able to go into any room and be comfortable. I learned how to um, deal with people. I learned how to deal with a lot of different types of people. Um, I also learned how to. I'm well. I'm starting to learn the process of diplomacy and learning how to use my influence to not necessarily get what I want, but I'm learning how to use my influence to build upon and receive the things and provisions that are needed for my purpose. Um, Now, on the flip side of that, I learned some things in ways on how to deal with people negatively. Um, for me, I don't deal with yelling. I'm not even just yelling, disrespect, and period. If I feel that you are disrespecting me, I'm gonna let it be known that that's not the play. Um, and that is one thing that I'm learning now, that the way in which I learned how to deal with things, like I'm an extremist. I'm either cool, calm, and collective, or I'm trying to figure out a way to take you out. I have no middle ground. Like, I'm just here. I'm here, and that's one thing that I learned from my environment, um, growing up, and now that's one of the things that is a point of concern for me, because where my trajectory is going, I can no longer operate in that realm. So now I have an understanding that even if I'm just even in my day-to-day dealings with people, I understand that I'm I'm always sowing a seed. So in the last chapter, we talked about giving away which giving away the very thing that you want to receive. And so that's what I'm learning what to do with people. I'm sowing seeds with people, and I'm constantly, one of the challenges from the last chapter was, you know, every person you come in contact with, you want to leave them with something. And that's the process that I'm going through now. Every person that I come in contact with, I'm trying to I'm trying to ensure that I'm leaving that person with something positive. Because if I can leave every person that I come in contact with something positive, um, to me it's a numbers game. If I'm giving you something positive, 9 times out of 10, I won't have to find myself in a position to where I'm no longer cool with you. I'm trying to take you out, you know. And so that's the conscious part of me thinking. That's the conscious part of me trying to figure out, okay, how can I better myself while at the same time attempting to ensure that I'm positively imparting things on everyone I come in contact with. Because if I'm able to do that, I can now I can now get rid of the memory of, okay, if that is an area of concern, making sure that you're taking the proper steps to change that situation, to change the possible outcomes. And that is conscious and intentional decision making. So that's what I really am taking away from this chapter is that the sowing is the work. There's work in sowing. Um, but in the sowing, it takes conscious effort. You have to you have to be intentional. You have to be strategic. Um, and you always have to be cognizant of that process. You don't cut it off. You have to cut it on. You can't take days off when it comes to making conscious decisions, um, because that is going to impact your reaping season. And one thing that I want to say that I'm finding out now is that the sowing the sowing is can be seen as backbreaking work. Just think about the process of planting a seed. Um, you're 9 times out of 10 you're on your knees, you're in the dirt, um, your hands are active, you're digging, you're planting, you're seeding, you're shoveling. Um, that can be strenuous work. Um, but once you master your process of sewing, it becomes second nature. You know, at first it's going to be a workout. It's going to stretch you. It's going to build you. Um, and a lot of times when you're getting stretched and build, you're going to go through moments of discomfort, um, because as you sow, sowing is also the process of increasing your capacity. So when you're going through the process of increasing your capacity, you're being stretched out. It's almost like a rubber band. You're just being stretched, being stretched, being stretched, being stretched. But the more and more you stretch, the more and more you can hold. So during your sowing seasons a lot of times aren't butterflies and rainbows. It's dirty. It's that's where they get it. Getting it from the mud. That's really what you're doing. You're really getting it from the mud. Um, so you have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to sow. You got to understand that it's not easy work to sow seeds, but once those seeds are sown, it's easy. I take that back. It's easy to sow seeds, to just throw seeds. It's easy just to throw seeds. You know, when you're not being mindful and intentional, you just sow seeds, no problem. But when you become intentional, when you accept your role as a farmer, once again, when you accept your role as a farmer, I believe all people are farmers because we're always going through the cycle of sowing and reaping. So when you're going through that process, that season of sowing, you got to get ready to get dirty. You got to be ready and prepared to get stretched out. You got to be ready to feel some pain. Um, you got to blood, sweat, and tears. You got to be ready for that. Now, now let's talk about the reaping season. The reaping season is not as bad as a sowing season, but it's still work. It's still work because um, one thing that reading this chapter really showed me is that even when you're going through your season of reaping, your reaping season is actually the start of your sowing season, because from the fruit that you reap, the fruit that you're going to pick, the products that are going to come to fruition, those are going to those are going to be where you get your seeds from for your next sowing season. So you have to be intentional with that as well. Um, since we had the whole COVID thing, and I was were home and things of that nature. I started a garden, right? Never had a garden before. Um, I knew very little about the art of gardening, the art of farming, things of that nature. Very little. Um, but I learned very quickly that it's work. It takes work. And when I started to study, one common thing that I started to see was that when you are reaping, you have to forsake some of your fruit in order to have your seeds for your next sowing season. So you have to be intentional and strategic with your reaping as well. You have to know when to pick. You have to know how to pick. Do you pull or do you twist? That could affect the fruit that you're reaping. Some things that you're gonna have to pull out. Some things you're gonna have to twist. Some things you're just gonna have to sit there and wait for it. Because we have to get things while they're ripe. And then there's certain fruit that you know we want to take off and allow it to lay out and die in order for us to use as seeds for our next season. So you know you have to go through the process of really formulating a principle based lifestyle where you're being intentional, you're being strategic, um, and you're being focused and mindful about everything that you do. And you have to put it on autopilot. You have to develop it to the point where you can put it on autopilot because in order to be efficient and effective, you have to learn how to consciously become intentional about what you're doing all the time because you're gonna always find yourself in two places. You're either gonna be sowing or you're gonna be reaping. Um, which is very, very important to us. Now, the last thing that they said in the chapter was this: as long as karma is evolutionary for both the self and everyone affected by the self, then the fruit of karma will be happiness and success. So I'm gonna read that one more time. As long as karma is evolutionary for both the self and everyone affected by the self, then the fruit of karma will be happiness and success. So evolutionary, that means that your process of sowing and reaping, it has to evolve. It should never be the same. It should not always be the same process because as you become, as you sow more and you become more conscious of what you're sowing and you become more conscious of how and when you reap your fruit, you're going to evolve. Your process is going to evolve. You're going to level up. And as you level up, karma is going to level up. You know, there might be things that you could have done all day when you were younger and never really had any adverse effects or, you know, didn't get any sour fruit. Um, but that was when you were in your 20s. Now that you're in your 30s and your 40s, you can't do those same things and expect the same results. You can't do those same things and expect that you won't be affected. Because guess what? You're evolving. As you as you gain and process more information and more know-how on how to be more effective and efficient, the guidelines change. I'm a firm believer in that. Um, Even in my spiritual walk, I'm a firm believer that as I mature spiritually, I am being held to a higher standard every time I mature spiritually. Every single time. Every single time that that I level up spiritually, all right, God is saying, okay, this might have been acceptable. Be that this might have been acceptable then, but this is not acceptable now. Because guess what? I evolved. My spiritual man evolved. My sowing and reaping process evolved. My understanding of cause and effect has evolved. So as that evolves, remember in the first chapter they talked about self, and self is dealing with the spirit, and making sure that you're in a pure space, pure potentiality. So if I'm developing in self, I have to be cognizant that everything that is going on in my sowing reaping process, that it doesn't really just affect just me. It affects everything that is connected to me. So that means my wife, my daughter, my family, my coworkers, the kids that I teach, the community that I live in, um, social media followers. Like everything that I do has the potential to either positively impact somebody or negatively impact somebody. Um, and like what I'm learning now is that I think the evolution process that I'm going now is that now that I'm cognitive of this, I'm in a place where I know I understand my sowing and reaping process. I'm being intentional and strategic with it. Um, but that doesn't mean that I allow other people to influence my process. Especially if the influence is not a positive influence, because a lot of times we deal with people and we feel like the only way in which we can deal with people is in a negative operating system. Um, and that's like one of the biggest challenges that I'm having right now. Um, I'm learning how to not engage in negativity. Um, Part of me used to, if you disrespected me, if I felt disrespected, if I felt like you were playing with my intellect, I was going to go through whatever I had to go through to one, straighten you, and then to two, learn you, and then to three, depending on the situation, embarrass you. Um, because that's what I learned how to do in my environment. Now I'm learning to, okay, you might not be feeling me, cool. You might disrespect me, that really ain't cool. But how do I want to spend my energy? Do I want to spend my energy trying to shoot shots at you, shoot flaming arrows at you, or do I want to sit here and use that energy to create content? Do I want to use that energy to build spiritual wealth? That's the way I have to look at things now. That's my conscious decision process. I ain't got to beef with everybody who don't like me. I don't have to beef with everybody who doesn't agree with what I agree with. Um, that's one of the reasons why on my social media over the past year, um, I've been very mindful about what I put on my social media. I've become very mindful about what I say on social media. I've become very mindful about um, drawing lines on my social media, um, especially with all the social things that are going on now. Um, I don't put a lot of I don't put a lot of the garden of my mind on social media because that's a sacred place. Um, and I learned this by reading this book is because part of the sowing and reaping is, you know, becoming transparent and showing people your thoughts. Your thoughts are fertile ground. Your thoughts are how you feel. Um, is almost like manure. You know, it can, if you use it correctly, you can, and for its intended purpose, it can help grow lush fields. Um, but if you use it for a negative purpose, you can use it to level a building. You can use it to make a bomb. Um, and so that's why I have become very, very thoughtful about how I interact on social media. Um, I made a decision probably about a year or two ago, um, that I would much rather have one-on-one, face-to-face conversations about certain issues, um, with individuals instead of sharing it on social media. Um, but I'm going to get more into that on another episode. But remember this, the third law of the seven laws of spiritual success is the law of karma, which is also can be called the law of cause and effect. Um, so we're about halfway through. We're about halfway through, with the book. Next week, I believe it is the law of least effort. I think, which is also a big one for me. I think you guys are really gonna enjoy that one. Because I took a lot out of it. Yep, it's the law of least effort. Um, I took a lot out of that chapter. So that's the chapter that we're reviewing. Next week, chapter four, the law of least effort. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. Um, like I said before, make sure that you're following us on Instagram at Coach Kel Inspires. Also, um, make sure that you're following us on at Jules and Tools Podcast on Instagram. And then you can find me, Kellen Gerard Allen, on Facebook. And you can like the Coach K page. And we are also on Apple Music, Apple Podcast, Apple Music. I think you can find it either way. We're on both. Spotify, Anchor. All you have to do is put in Coach Kel. And then the big one, YouTube. All of the content going forward will be on YouTube for the podcast, for Hi, I'm Kel, and What Are You Reading, Coach? And I think me and my wife are going to do a series too. I don't think me and my wife are going to do a series. I know me and my wife are going to do a series. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. Please comment. Oh, and by the way, so since we are getting ready to be done with this book, because I think on the next episode I'm actually going to do 2 chapters, because the next 2 chapters were kind of small. So these are some of the books that I have purchased and I am waiting to read. The first one is As a Black Man Thinketh, by Reggie Whitaker. So I want you guys to vote. Should we go with As a Black Man Thinketh, or should we go with Black Fortunes, by Shamari Willis? Hope you can see it. Or should we go by... Now, this one I was actually reading. I've actually already started reading this one. Heavy book. Very heavy book. I'm actually part of a book club on Facebook, that my guy DeAlex Sosa Martin started. And we started reading this book. But Between Two Worlds and Me, by Tanisha Coates. You can vote on this one. Then I'm gonna do this one anyway. I just don't know exactly when we're gonna do it. This here is The Tongue of Creative Force. I've read most of this book, it got so deep that I had to stop reading it because it's real. And this is by Charles Capps. Then we have Cry Like a Man. This is by Jason Wilson. Jason Wilson is you've probably seen him on Instagram. He's a martial artist. So you've probably seen one of his videos when he's working with a young man in martial arts. He released his book last year. Haven't even broke the cover of this one. I'm ready. It's called Cry Like a Man. So let me know if you want to do Cry Like a Man. And then this one is a big one. This is an older book. I think this was the first book that I read from out of Oprah's book club. This is The Measure of a Man by Sidney Poitier. It is a great book. It's almost like what it says right. It's a spiritual autobiography. So those are the books. So we have The Measure of a Man. We have Cry Like a Man. I'm gonna do this one anyway, so I'm not gonna let you vote on that one. Between the World and Me. Black Fortunes, and then As a Black Man Thinketh. So y'all vote. Let me know which one we're gonna read next and go through. Because what I would like to do with the next book, I would like for us to go through the process of, reading it together, read a chapter, do a review, and then follow up that review with, someone who might like to join and discuss what they took from the book. I think that'd be awesome. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But please let me know what book you want to go to next. And I thank you guys for tuning in. I'm starting to ramble. So I thank you guys for tuning in. We'll have another episode Friday. So have a great rest of your week. I pray you have a wonderful week. And thank you for tuning in. Peace.